I'd like to kind of kick things off by obviously just kind of stating the obvious and saying that the last couple of years has been extremely challenging for Scottish media, and I think that's a bit of an understatement worthy of winning a Drum Grand Prix award. But for Scotland's broadcast media organisations like the BBC and STV, I think they've had an even rougher ride. Certainly much more challenging debates have been taking place at their organisations. With digital technology obviously continuing to develop at an astonishing pace, and advertising revenues diminishing at quite a frightening pace, Scotland's established broadcasters can't afford to stand still. They really need to take the lead in this. So what are the major challenges facing broadcasters like the BBC and STV in this digital age? Now, I'm obviously delighted to say we've got Atholl and Bobby here representing two of Scotland's major broadcasters, probably two of Scotland's most important media organisations as well. Both obviously very different, one obviously a commercial organisation, the other a public service broadcaster. So they have kind of quite different challenges, I suppose, from a backroom point of view, but obviously facing many of the same challenges as media organisations. Now, I'm quite keen to keep this quite an open forum, so rather than have Atholl and Bobby sit here and kind of talk to you for 45 minutes or an hour, if you've got any questions or any points you'd like to raise or any kind of points you'd like to have expanded upon, then please feel free to kind of get involved, raise your hand or just shout out. By all means, we'll try and get you involved as possible. I suppose to start off with, what I'm always quite keen to do is get a little bit of a point of view of the audience to kick things off, really. So I'd just like to throw a question out to everybody in the audience and ask, what do you expect or what do you want to get from your broadcasters in this digital age? I don't know if anybody would like to kind of get the ball rolling and give us a point of view on what you expect from organisations like the BBC and STV. Anyone?
I would like to get a broadcasting setup which really celebrated the diversity of the United Kingdom. So Scotland was served well in whichever, from whoever, so the audiences get a good deal that way, because it's not happening properly at the moment.
Yeah. Anybody else?
I think issues of quality of current reporting as well, maintaining and sustaining quality programming across society.
Yeah. Anybody else finally before we kick it off? No? Right, well, we'll get the guys involved then, I think, at this point. And I'm going to cut to the chase, and I'm going to go for the juggler here at Atholl and ask, how could you let Heather the Weather leave? How are you going to replace her?
Gail's reign begins.
Right. Okay. So
on January the 4th.
Right. So she's
stepping into the hot seat.
Right. Okay.
And we have another new weather presenter, Gillian Smart, who will do some of our weekends and mornings. But Heather is quite happily off. She spent the last few years splitting her career between the BBC and working at the Science Centre.
Right.
So after 15 years at the BBC, she's decided to go off and concentrate on science and education. And she's got some work with Learning Teaching Scotland on the new national curriculum.
Right.
She's going to start in the new year. So
okay, well, that's good.
Wishes her all the best.
Yeah, well, good. That's got cleared up. That note cleared up for everyone, because I know everyone was very concerned about that. So anyway, let's get into the nitty gritty. I suppose we'll start with yourself again, Atholl. How would you kind of sum up where BBC Scotland is at the moment as a media organisation, and what do you feel are the biggest challenges that you face as a public service broadcaster in this day and age?
I think where BBC Scotland is that particularly since we moved to this building, the organisation is performing better than it was at Queen Margaret Drive. The challenges for us are how we move the BBC in Scotland on in a very challenging time for the media industry. And there's kind of 3 or 4 things that are our main focus. The first one is how BBC Scotland can contribute to building a very successful creative sector in Scotland. The second one is how we grow network production, so that's the programmes that we make here for the UK networks. and we have a plan to treble the amount of network production over the next few years. And the third one is really about improving the public approval of the BBC in Scotland. So we think there's a big communications task for us to do to tell people about the value of the BBC in Scotland and a lot of the good work that we do. And in news in particular, it's about improving the news services, coming into a very important period around the UK general election and around the Scottish general election. It's how we can be absolutely leading in that public space of democratic debate. So those are the 3 or 4 challenges that we have in BBC Scotland. In the wider BBC, obviously there will be a big debate over the next few years about the licence fee, and indeed the chairman of the BBC will himself lead a big debate about what is the right size and scale of the BBC going forward.
And moving over to Bobby now, obviously STV's been grabbing some headlines recently as you go to war with ITV. But I mean, obviously, I don't know if you could just kind of sum up some of the challenges that you face, obviously, as a commercial broadcaster in this day and age, and obviously you're moving into the digital arena as well, and how you're kind of tackling that.
I think for us the challenges are all based around the transition to digital, and I think that is both in the world of television as you move from being an analogue original from 1957 in STV's case, 61 in Grampian's case, to being one of hundreds of channels that people can watch through television, and also in a digital age where television is not so ubiquitous and unique as it once was, and people can consume all kinds of other content, whether it's on handhelds or on computers that will be linked to televisions in the very near future, then you have a very big challenge to stay relevant. And for me, that is about having a relevance and having a very strong identity. So I think those are challenges for us as a business in this landscape in Scotland, but also they are opportunities, because the place on digital platforms and the ability to reach people, these are not the sole province of people who aren't already broadcasting. In other words, we've got just as much right and just as much permission to transition into digital as anybody else, and more than that, we have an established track record and we have a very strong content archive that goes back, as I say, 50 years. And I think against that macro environment, which I think has some questions for free-to-air broadcasters because the model is being challenged by other ways of consuming content, nevertheless, I think there for some considerable time is a very strong place that broadcasters like ourselves can fulfill. Everybody has a television set. People have several television sets. There are more TV sets than there are people. And it remains, at this point, a relatively efficient way of getting content into people's houses. If you take Freeview, you buy a TV set, you've got an aerial, you've got a license obviously, and then you can flick around from channel to channel instantly. If you tried to deliver the X Factor to the 16, 17 million people who watched it on Sunday using the UK broadband network, one, it would be almost impossible at this point, and two, it would be hugely expensive in terms of bandwidth. So let's not, call television's time just yet. Having said that, I think there are some identity challenges for us, and I think we've moved from being Scottish Television and Grampian Television to being STV in Scotland. We have an online offering that now reaches 1 million unique users a month, which makes us one of Scotland's most popular commercial websites. And I think that that is a strong base to go forward. We've started a programme strategy that differentiates us from what ITV is doing, and we've not gone the way of Granada or Tyne Tees or Anglia, where there are no regional programmes. I mean, there was a question about the variety and the diversity and about quality, and I think those are two areas that we are absolutely committed to addressing. We're in the early stages of that schedule. We've been very clear and said, hands up, not everything we've done in 2009 has worked, but we're learning, we're putting skills back into the organisation that we weren't using, marketing, scheduling, things that weren't as prominent in the mix as they should have been, and we're taking that experience forward.